This is Ross Feingold on the Taiwan Hashtag program, hosted by Storm Media. Today, not coming to you from Taiwan, our usual location. We are on the road. We are in Hong Kong. Yes, we are in Hong Kong, the site of the ongoing anti-government protests and the site of a very interesting ongoing situation in bilateral relations, which is, of course, linked to the protest, and that is the extradition of Tong-kai, or the proposed extradition, or the proposed return of Tong-kai to Taiwan to face trial for the murder of his then-girlfriend, Poon Hui-wing. But before we get to that, the breaking news here in Hong Kong this morning is that democracy activist Joshua Wong Zifeng, has been denied the right to compete in the upcoming district council election. Yes, despite all the ongoing protests and anger by some segments of the public here in Hong Kong, demands for direct election of the chief executive as well as the legislative council, there are also local electoral bodies called the district councils, which handle more local level issues of municipal governments as opposed to broader Hong Kong major policy, Hong Kong SAR budgets, and those kinds of issues. So Joshua Wong, political activist, a leader of the so-called leaderless protest movement, but somebody who's taken a very high profile in the protest movement. And of course, he began his profile in politics during the Occupy Central movement in 2014. More recently, traveling around the world. He was in the United States. He was in Europe, meeting political leaders, seeking their support for the ongoing protest movements here in Hong Kong. He was seeking to run in the district council. So it's almost like moving from a national level, from a federal or a central government level to not even a state level, but something smaller. He was seeking to serve on the district council, and he was denied. Why was he denied? According to the relevant government officers in their announcement on Tuesday morning here in Hong Kong, there are concerns that his political party, Demosisto, still seems to support self-determination. And according to the government officer who made this determination, their political position of maybe a referendum, self-determination by the people of Hong Kong, is inconsistent with the basic law that is Hong Kong's mini constitution, and it's inconsistent with Hong Kong's status as a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China under one country, two systems. The key thing being that Hong Kong is a part of the People's Republic of China, according to the government officer, and thus any call for self-determination by a referendum, even if it's just advisory, it's not obviously not going to be implemented by the Hong Kong government or the government in Beijing, but just even supporting this idea because it's inherently consistent with the basic law and with the laws of the People's Republic of China and Hong Kong status. Thus, you're ineligible. You can't run for this district council. Again, this news was just announced within the last few hours here Tuesday morning in Hong Kong. I'm sure Mr. Wong is going to have a very public reaction in the coming hours. He's very good on social media, so we should be looking for what he writes on Twitter and Facebook as well. And we're probably going to see reaction from those political personalities in Europe, in the United States, who've come to know Mr. Wong and support his efforts to bring greater democracy to Hong Kong. And I would expect a reaction from political leaders in Taiwan. Why? Well, again, as we know from events over the past few months, political leaders in Taiwan have been very supportive of the protest movements. President Tsai, the Democratic Progressive Party of President Tsai, which controls both the central government as well as has a majority in the legislative yuan, very vocal in supporting the protesters, very vocal in supporting their demands, greater transparency in how the police have responded to the protests, a demand for direct election of the chief executive, of the legislative council, amnesty for people who've been arrested during the protest. They've even met with Mr. Wong and other leaders when they visited Taiwan. Their most recent visit was only last month in September. So understandably, we should expect a reaction from Taiwan's political leaders. The interesting thing here is if we think back in time to the era when Taiwan was still under martial law, when other political parties than the Kuomintang were outlawed, The number of issues that you could raise in the public space was heavily constricted. For example, most notably, you could not advocate for replacing the Republic of China with a Republic of Taiwan or a Formosa Republic. I would expect the DPP, which came from that constriction, from that movement, they're going to be very supportive of Mr. Wong and his political party and the stance of his political party, and that they should have the right to advocate for self-determination, even if it's against the letter or the spirit of the basic law. Again, it's not going to happen anytime soon. The Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government is not going to call for separating Hong Kong from the People's Republic of China. And obviously, the central government in Beijing is never going to agree to that. But the DPP, especially the older personalities, people who are involved in what's called the Dongwai, the outside the party movement, going back to the 70s, the 80s, period before Taiwan democratized in the late 80s, they're going to be very, very sympathetic. They're going to see a lot of parallels between a government official saying, you're ineligible, you cannot run for office on the basis that your political party has called for self-determination, has called for referendums. We know that the DPP in Taiwan has been very supportive of referendums. They liberalized the referendum law, which brought us a bit of referendum chaos in the local election last year when there were also 10 referendums on the ballot, and that's why subsequently earlier this year the referendum law was changed to make it a little more difficult to bring referendums in Taiwan. But anyway, DPP, very supportive of political parties' right to have a political view, whatever it is, however unpopular it might be with the central government, or in this case the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government, and also very sympathetic to the idea of having referendums, the idea that these principles are things that the DPP fought for decades, literally, in Taiwan until the end of martial law. So I would expect to see President Tsai and DPP leaders, whether in the central government, such as Su Zhenchang, Mainland Affairs Council, or, again, legislators, to take to social media or to make statements to the TV or newspaper media in Taiwan, very sympathetic to Joshua Wong, very supportive of his continued efforts to seek elected office, and they're going to be very critical of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government's decision to prohibit him from running in these district council elections. And that is going to continue a pattern of criticism between Hong Kong officials and Taiwan officials. So in recent days, we know last Wednesday, Tong-kai was released from prison here in Hong Kong after serving a sentence for using his girlfriend's financial ATM cards. He accessed her banking accounts and was charged with a crime in Hong Kong because he did it in Hong Kong. And he was sentenced to a jail time, and the jail sentence ended last Wednesday when he was released. Why was he only sentenced to that and not for the murder? Well, that's the core dispute that is ongoing. Hong Kong government has been very clear that under legal principles that apply here in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong, of course, has a very deep legal tradition that began during the British colonial era, and they still adhere to many of those legal concepts. They said we cannot prosecute Chan for murder that occurred outside of Hong Kong. We cannot try him for this murder that he allegedly committed in Taiwan. We will not try him here in Hong Kong. Yet the Taiwan government keeps asking the Hong Kong government to do that. And this has led again to this war of words back and forth. From media reports in Taiwan, including in Storm Media, commentators have discussed this in quite detail. It seems that the Taiwan government prepared for three possibilities. One possibility was that Hong Kong would say, yes, we will try him here. We'll put him on trial in the Hong Kong court. And under this scenario, Taiwan was prepared to provide Hong Kong with the evidence that the Taiwan authorities collected at the murder scene back in February, March of 2018. Another scenario was that Hong Kong would facilitate the return of Chen to Taiwan but there needed to be, from the Taiwan perspective, some kind of cooperation agreement that would allow Hong Kong to provide the evidence that Hong Kong has collected in Hong Kong and provide this evidence to the Taiwan prosecutors. The third scenario was that that Chan was willing to come back to Taiwan, but that Taiwan would have to send police. So in the second scenario, Chan was going to be returning to to Taiwan, maybe accompanied by a civilian, maybe accompanied by Hong Kong police officers. The third scenario was that Taiwan was going to send its own police officers or other types of judicial officials to detain Chan in the Hong Kong airport, escort him onto the airplane, guard him on the airplane back to Taiwan. So under all three scenarios, there had to be a level of cooperation. It seems that the Taiwan side kept insisting that this needed to be formalized, whether there was going to be a trial in Hong Kong or the latter two scenarios where Chan would return to Taiwan, whether escorted by someone from Hong Kong or someone from Taiwan would go to Hong Kong to escort him back and collect the evidence. Under scenarios 2 and 3, Taiwan would still need cooperation. So all three scenarios, whether a trial in Hong Kong or trial in Taiwan, the latter two scenarios, the Taiwan side was saying we need to have some kind of formalized agreement. And we know from the back and forth between the two sides that any kind of formal agreement was not something that Hong Kong government was going to enter into at this point in time. Again, this is kind of what was the genesis of the extradition bill that led to so much protest in Hong Kong, because Hong Kong was saying we don't have an agreement. We're not looking to enter into a bilateral agreement with Taiwan at this time. So we'll have a unilateral law here in Hong Kong that will allow us to send a suspect to other jurisdictions. Obviously, what the Hong Kong public objected to was that other jurisdictions didn't just include Taiwan, it included the entire world and China. And people in Hong Kong were concerned that they could be extradited to China, and that's what led to the protests. Eventually, the bill was withdrawn by the Hong Kong government. So there's still no formalized process to send Chan to Taiwan simply because he is wanted by the authorities in Taiwan. So where are we today? Well, we still have Chan or his public spokesperson, the Reverend Poon Hui-wing, who is willing to escort him to Taiwan. The Taiwan authorities say now, we're not refusing his entry into Taiwan. He still needs to go get a visa, apparently. But if the Taiwan authorities are still insisting on any kind of agreement with Hong Kong, it's not going to happen. If the Taiwan authorities are insisting that they need evidence from the Hong Kong authorities, again, the Hong Kong authorities are not going to provide any evidence that they may have gathered when they interrogated Chan. But the Taiwan authorities, and this has been pointed out, when I say authorities, I mean the prosecutors and the police, they conducted an investigation at the scene. They have video, they have DNA evidence, etc. They should have enough evidence to put Chan on trial in Taiwan without the need for any evidence from the Hong Kong authorities. And that's why I think we see growing criticism in Taiwan, let alone here in Hong Kong, of the way that the Taiwan government has handled this so far. So again, as we discussed in previous shows, Taiwan government, their position is probably going to migrate. I would expect to see some kind of settlement eventually, unless people in Hong Kong, including Reverend Poon, who does have a good relationship with the authorities in Beijing, come to take the view that Chan is now becoming some kind of pawn in either Taiwan-Hong Kong relations or in the Taiwan election. And again, there is a lot of back and forth between the Kuomintang and the DPP about how the central government in Taiwan has handled this. So that is a significant aspect of the story that has been developing, is whether or not Chan won't come at all, he's going to change his mind, or as we've seen from media reports in the last few days, that he's still willing to come, but it's going to have to wait until after Taiwan's presidential and legislative UN elections on January 11th, 2020. So we will be watching for that aspect of the story and the entire story in the coming days. This is Ross Feingold speaking from Hong Kong on the Taiwan Hashtag program. Thank you for watching.